use another editor like Atom or Brackets or Visual Studio Code in the meantime. Just open up last week's. Whoops. So they will provide you, likely they'll either email you an activation key or they'll make it available in your account portal. Right, here's my license ID here. So you can either download the activation code once you have it. If you go to help and register, whoops. So you can either use the activation code or your JetBrains account here. And then it'll know that once they give you the educational license, you'll be set and it won't keep asking you until this time next year. Okay. So I'm just going to go back to my lesson 4. As I asked you to do, I'll just make a copy of it, paste it, which I will rename to lesson 5. And I'll just open up lesson 5 now in my code editor. So it's our exact same files from last week where we added our input validation, both our client-side validation with HTML5 validators, as well as our server-side validation when we were saving with our PHP where we were checking that we got the proper kinds of input values. I just want to review one quick thing about this. Why did we say last week that it was necessary if we, on our form, we use these HTML5 attributes like required, type equals number, minimum. These do a good job of validating our inputs. So why did we bother basically writing the same rules all over again in PHP on our save page? Why didn't we simply rely on the HTML5 validation rules that are on our album details form? Yeah, we did validation checks here with PHP as well. And I'm not a big fan of doing more work than we need to do. So why'd we do this?
For server-side validation.
Okay.
Then if somebody is using the phone, then he can't just switch off JavaScript and then save the data.
Okay, exactly. Thank you, Sabrina. So typically, yeah, users are going to go to our album details form, and if they put in invalid data, our form's going to catch them. However, we have no real way to stop someone from trying to send data directly to our save page without first going through. And in that video we watched last week, they used a tool called Fiddler where we can do exactly that. We can send HTTP requests to any web page address. So if there's no validation on that page, we're going to wind up getting allowing people to send junk data into our database, which we don't want. So we want to validate both on our forms as well as on our save pages on our server side. Good answer, sir. Thank you. So I'll just load up my page in the browser, kind of where we left off last week. So we had built our albums page. We did this a couple weeks ago. We used Bootstrap, so it gave a bit of styling to it. So we kind of have 3 pages working. We had albums, we have our form, and we have our save page, which is just kind of an invisible page. We're not going to go straight to the save page. If I try to go there directly, what do you expect to see if I try and load the save page directly without submitting my form? What are we going to see in the browser? Whoops. Well, that'll be an error because I spelled it wrong. So we haven't submitted the form. Our save page is saying, okay, well, where's the required data? You're loading the page, but there's no post data that we're trying to save. So we're not typically going to go to this page directly. In fact, later on, we're going to make this mostly a hidden page. We're only going to see this page if there's a validation error. If everything saves correctly, we're just going to take the user off somewhere else after we save. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of formatting to both our albums page and our albums details page. Okay. So let's open up albums. We're going to do a few things here. Here's what our page looks like in the browser. I want to add a heading on here, and I want to add a link so that if someone wants to add a new album, they can just click that link and they'll get our form rather than having to type the addresses, right? We don't know the names of the pages on the sites we're on. We need links to click and move around. So in here, in my albums.php, in the body, let's put on a heading here that says albums. So that's going to be right inside our opening body tag because we want this before our HTML table. Let's also put on a link so we can click it, and if we click it, we're going to get to our form. So we're just adding a heading and a link at the top of the page. So that's lines 14 and 15, which I've highlighted. We'll put similar things on our album details page. In fact, I think we already have a heading, but we're going to want to put a link on there to go back to the list of albums from our form. So that way we can navigate between those two pages. So now we can add, we actually have a heading here. So on this form, we want a link that goes back to our albums list as well. So we've already got an H1 here. Let's just put a link on our form that takes us back to our list page. So now we can jump between the two pages. Later on, we'll actually build a navigation bar with, a few other things in there. For now, this will do. We'll remove these links later. We'll keep them for today. So now I should be able to go back and forth at least. I have view and I have add. Nothing too complicated, just a couple HTML tags. I don't think anybody's head should be spinning at this point.
I could have some assistance for the file
Okay, I can't do it right this second.
maybe during break then.
Sure. Now we've also got on our view page, we're using Bootstrap. You can see the style sheet. We've got two different fonts applied here. So we want to actually, not only do we want to, we're going to do few things with our style sheet. We want to add our CSS to our form. We want to add the link. We want to apply some of the classes to make our form look better. The other thing we're going to do, if we look at our albums page, where do the style sheet, the Bootstrap style sheets, where do they live right now? Where are we accessing them from? Yeah, we're accessing them from the Bootstrap CDN. What does CDN mean? What's that stand for? Yeah, it's a content delivery network, right? So we don't have local copies of these. These are out on the internet. So it's convenient. We can just slap up the link and our style sheets work, but probably not a great idea really to use these. Why would we be better off to actually download copies of these CSS files and have local copies. There's two reasons, two benefits of using those copies locally instead of external style sheets. DJ? Okay, that's number one, right? They change that link. Well, all our CSS gets broken. Guess what? They're not going to send us an email or give us a phone call saying, by the way, we're changing the links to our CDNs. Things are just going to break. So, sorry? Right. It's also all our CSS is slower because every class has to be piped over the internet. If the style sheet is local to our pages, it's going to run faster. There's actually one other benefit in terms of when we're writing the code. Anybody think of any other benefit? Right, let's say I want to apply a class here. A class equals, because those style sheets are not local in our project, they're on the internet, right? We don't get a list of all the styles in the style sheet. If we download those into our project, when we type class equals, our code editor will read those CSS files and it will list out all the classes for us. So we have to do less guessing about what kind of classes we want to use. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to download local copies there. So there's two CSS files and down at the bottom, two JavaScript files, Bootstrap's JavaScript as well as jQuery. So we want to download this stuff and run it all locally for all the reasons we just talked about. So let's make two subfolders here. Let's make a new directory. We'll call this one CSS. And we'll make another subfolder called JS, and that's where we'll put the JavaScripts.
For Adam, which a few of us are using, would that be add project folder or something?
Yes, I think so. So we want to download these files from Bootstrap and put the CSS files here and the JS files here. Now, there's a couple ways we could do this. We could actually just take these links, copy and paste them one at a time in the browser and download the files. Or we could go to Bootstrap and jQuery and actually download them separately. I think we'll just do the easy way. I'll just take this link. So here's my first style sheet link. Let's copy it and paste it into a new tab in the browser. And then we can just save that file into our CSS directory. So I'll copy that whole link, starting with HTTPS and ending with CSS. So I'll paste it in. There's the whole style sheet. And if I hit Control S, it'll save the file with that same name. So let's save it in lesson 5 CSS. You can see the path here. That's the folder we just created. So if now I go back to my PHP storm, we've got that first Bootstrap, the minified CSS. I'll do the same thing again with the next CSS file, and then we'll do the same thing with our two JS files, except we'll save them to lesson 5 JS. We won't have to do this again. From now on, if we copy the folder each week, we have local copies of all of these things. So grab our second CSS link. This is the Bootstrap theme style sheet. If we hit Control S, or if you're a Mac user, hit Command S. So now we've got both style sheets. And now I'll do the same thing with my two JavaScript links. Just copy those URLs. So I'll save jQuery to the JS folder. And then we'll save the Bootstrap JavaScript as well. So you can see in my project, there's 2 CSS files in the CSS folder. There's 2 JS files in the JS folder. Now there's lots of other ways we could get these. There's some command line tools like Bower that will install these all for us. If you want to use something like that, you can. So now we can modify our links. So here to my path, I'm going to take out everything right up to CSS. So now the href is just CSS/bootstrap, and I can take out these other tags, integrity and cross origin. That's just designed when I'm using the content delivery network. They're preventing cross-site scripting attacks. So we can take those out. Now we just have a really simple link. Rel equals style sheet, href is CSS bootstrap. So I'll do that for both of them. So we're no longer using CSS files that live on the internet. We're working with our local style sheets. So here was the benefit I was talking about. If I try and apply a class now to any HTML element, because my CSS files are local, before I didn't get any of these code prompts, now all of the Bootstrap classes are available in my code editor. So that'll just save us a bit of time. You know, we know if we want a button, well, we can just type B and now we can see all the classes that we might want to use in terms of different sizes, different colors, etc. So we don't get this kind of assistance when our style sheets are external to our project. And now I'll just do the same thing here. My script source down here is simply JS/jQuery and JS/bootstrap, and I can take out So we're not going to see any difference really when we reload our pages in the browser, but they should run faster. We don't have to worry about, as DJ said, if jQuery or Bootstrap moves those links or changes them, and our code editor is going to give us the code hinting associated with those files. So I can refresh my site. We're really not going to see anything different. Still going to look the same. Now that we have these local links, I want to copy them also to our album details page, because not only should our albums page have access, but we want our form to use it too. So I'm going to copy the CSS from the head section, and I'll copy the JS section that's down at the bottom. We'll copy that to the same place on our form as well. Now, I did have a few email conversations with a few students who really maybe pointed out to me I haven't done a very good job explaining what Bootstrap even is and why we use it. Anybody Is anybody able to kind of explain that? What's the whole point of it? Why do we bother with using Bootstrap? Why don't we just either have no CSS, or why don't we just make our own CSS? You guys all know how to write a style sheet. What's the benefit of using Bootstrap?
Standardized across multiple websites, so the user interface is easy to pick up for new users.
Okay, yeah. Any other reasons we would use Bootstrap rather than writing our own CSS, Raj?
Time saver.
Right, saves time, right? It gives us all kinds of pre-existing formatting and classes that we don't have to use, right? So for example, there's like 10 different kinds of buttons that we could automatically use. Now, what if we want to use some of what Bootstrap gives us to save us time? Bootstrap's also responsive, so it helps us build sites that will scale to mobile devices, which is a lot of work to do on our own with CSS. But what if let's say we want to use Bootstrap because it saves us time, but we want some kind of button. And if we look at the Bootstrap theme for a minute, if I go to components, buttons. Oh, right here. So here are all the buttons that come with it. Let's say we're doing a website for a client and their colors are, I don't know, like one of their main colors of their organization is purple. So none of these buttons we think are really going to go very well, but we want to use Bootstrap for most of the CSS to save time. So how are we going to go and create a purple button if we're using Bootstrap and it doesn't offer us a purple button? Do we have to throw Bootstrap out and then do all the CSS ourselves?
No, I'm pretty sure you can just define a button object that you use.
Okay, you're on the right track. How'd you do it? Yeah, so what we would do, let's say we want to use most of these styles, but not all of them. We can still go and make our own style sheet and put in our own styles, and then we would include it here. And if we want our style sheet to take precedence, where would it go? Above or below the Bootstrap links? If we want ours to be first. Nothing to prevent us from making our own CSS and using it for any custom classes we want to design, but then we can use a framework like Bootstrap for doing the rest. So we're not limited to what it gives us. We can still do our own styling on top, but it saves us time from having to do all of the styling ourselves. So many applications will use both. There'll be the Bootstrap style sheets or a similar framework, like Google has their own called Material Design. Maybe some of you have seen it, that Google uses. Yahoo has one called Pure CSS. So you can download it, you can use it in your application, but then you can write your own style sheet as well and put anything you want in your own style sheet. If whatever the pre-built one gives you is not exactly what you want, you can override it in certain places. So now we've applied it to the details page. So you noticed my font changes, starting to look like it was styled with Bootstrap. Our form doesn't look great though. What things do you think we should change about with the form? And we can use some Bootstrap classes to fix some of the formatting problems. What do we need to do to make it look better?
You just start with the color, background color.
Okay, we could do a background color. Yep.
You can move the form in the middle, in the center.
Okay, we could move it over. There's one particular problem with the form that makes it look like it was done by someone who doesn't know what they're doing. It's not aligned, right? The text boxes just go immediately beside the labels. So we can use Bootstrap to give each of the label a standard width. So all our text boxes are going to be aligned. one on top of the other. And maybe we want to push the button over here so all our boxes and button are aligned vertically. That's what people would expect to see in a form, right? This looks like it was created by someone who has no idea what they're doing. So let's fix that. So in here, we're going to give our labels a class. So Bootstrap basically divides our pages into 12 columns. So we can specify any element as being a certain number of columns wide. So if we apply this class to all of the labels, we may have to add one other class definition here. This should hopefully apply a standard width to those labels, which will then align our text boxes. And the SM obviously for small, so we can adjust and create different sizes of columns. There's extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. Let's see how this looks. We may have to play with it some more. Okay, I think that's not so good, too big. Right? There's way too much space now here. So maybe we won't do it as, let's try 2 and see if that's any better. If not, there's something else we can apply to it. That's maybe better. So now each labels get given a standard width, so our text boxes line up. You suggested we could also move the whole thing over. So we could at least add some padding so it's not jammed up against the left edge of the page. So we could actually put this whole thing, let's add a main tag. We'll put all the content of the page inside of main. Our heading, our link, and our form. And we can give this one a class of container. So that's a Bootstrap class kind of designed to hold a whole bunch of other HTML elements, and it's going to have a little bit of padding, so it should push it away from the left edge of the page. It won't center it perfectly. But it looks better there, I think. The other thing we want to do is let's change this button. Let's use one of the other button classes. And we want to also push it over. So rather than our button being in the first column, our button is in the second column. So we'll put one column to the left of the button, and then our button will show up over here, right underneath our last text box. So here are our different button classes. What color should we make our submit button? So there's the default. That's what we get right now. Green, blue, green. All right, so if we want to use green, we'll use one of these success classes. That'll turn our button green, and then we'll push it over as well. So on our button, first let's make it green. If we give it a button and BTN success, that should change the background to green and the foreground to white. I think that'll do the job. So that changes both the background and foreground color. We could also change the size if we wanted to, although I think it's sized probably appropriately. But now we want to push it over one column, right? Because our labels are in the first column and our text boxes start in the second column, and we want the button to appear underneath the text boxes. So we'll add one more class, which is call SM offset, meaning put one column on the left of this element. So rather than this element being in the first column, it's being pushed over to the second column because that's where our text boxes are. So we're applying 3 different Bootstrap classes. This should give us the formatting we want. Our button will be green with white text, and it should all appear in line now. Quick peek. There. I think that's better. I'm going to try one other thing. These are also squished together this way. Maybe a little bit of padding or spacing in between them wouldn't be a bad idea. I'm going to try this. I'm not sure if it's going to work. We say form group. I don't know if this class will give us a bit of padding or not. I'll try it around just the first one and see if that gives us any space between our first box and second box. Yeah, there we go. So it gives us a little padding by adding the form group class. You don't have to follow these styles. I'm just trying to make it look a little better. We're going to be looking at this page for months. I'd rather at least look somewhat like a page somebody might actually pay us for. So I'll just apply that form group to our 3 field sets. Maybe a little better. You're free to play around with other classes in here, do other things you like. It's not really a focus of the course, but our site should look half decent as we work with it. That was really all I wanted to do with this. Our albums page is already nicely formatted with Bootstrap. We've got our heading and our link, and we're already using Bootstrap so that our table looks not too bad. Anybody have any questions so far? Haven't actually done any PHP code. Did that help at all? Did that help at all? We had our conversation. Make a little more sense why we're using it? Okay. So we're going to come back to this page later. We're not really going to have to add much in the way of HTML, but we're going to need to add a bunch of PHP code to this later. For adding new albums, this form's fine. We don't need PHP, HTML, and CSS is good. But later on, we want to be able to edit an album, which means we're going to need to load up this page and populate an existing album into it so somebody could change the values. That's a bit more complicated, so we're going to leave that for the last part of class today. What we're going to do first is we're going to add delete functionality on this page. So for every album, we want to add, right now we've got 3 columns. We want a delete column with a word or a button that says delete. And when the user clicks it, we want, well, what should happen?
We want the column to disappear.
Well, that would be one option. That wasn't really what I was thinking.
I think what we need to do is when we hit the delete button, we need to run an SQL script that deletes the item at that layer in the loop.
Okay. Okay. So eventually, yeah, we'll want to run that delete command in our database. There's probably something we want to do first, though.
You want to ask the user if they
Absolutely. Why do we want to do that?
in case they hit it by accident.
Right, because very easily people click the wrong thing. Okay, not only they click the wrong thing, especially if they're on a mobile device, you have chubby thumbs like me, very easy to hit the wrong delete link. Right? And once you delete something from a database, it is gone. The only way to get it back is what? What happens if you accidentally delete something from a database and then suddenly you realize you didn't want to delete that?
Have to do it again.
Okay. Well, you could create the data again. It's possible, but sometimes the data is not yours, right? Maybe a user of your application put that data in and you don't know what the data is. So if it gets deleted, how would that happen with the web application? I've had it happen many times where clients say, crap, I deleted something I didn't mean to. What do I do? Okay, so typically what happens is with most web hosts, they will take a nightly backup of all of your databases, and they typically keep those backups. Well, actually, I'll show you what it looks like. Rather than me describe it, I'll show it to you. So here's a hosting company that I use often. So I had one of my clients say they accidentally deleted something, which was a problem. They run all kinds of events, and I built an online registration system, and they accidentally deleted an event. They had it in there twice, so they thought they were deleting the empty one. Instead, they deleted an event that 50 people had registered for. So they deleted all of those registrations to the event. So here's what happens. I can go in. Here's a list of all my databases. So I can pick a database. Some of these are MySQL, some of them are other kinds of databases. Oh, this is very slow today. And typically they will take a backup every night and they'll keep them. I don't know why this is so slow. They'll typically keep them for maybe 14 days. So if you delete something, you can typically find it, but you better find it quickly. If it's been deleted much longer than that, try another one. Be nice if this actually loads. Well, I can see a couple of here. So here was backup from the last 2 days, and they give me two options. I can either download the backup to my local server if I want to look at it on my machine. I can download the whole database and open it up, or I can do a restore. But if I do a restore, that will overwrite the new database. So if there's been new data since that backup, I'm going to be wiping it out. So typically the best thing to do is download it, open the database up on your local machine, find the data that was deleted, and add it back. But you only have, like I said, you typically only have about 2 weeks to do this. If the data is older than that, it's probably gone. That's why many companies, so here, for example, you can see all the nightly backups. So every night, so I've got, and then I've got a couple back to January. So this is typically what you might get with a hosting company that you have access to. This is why many applications, when the user thinks they're deleting data, like on Facebook, they never actually delete anything. All they do is they mark that item as inactive or invisible so it doesn't show up, right? If you try and delete a photo, you're not really deleting it. They just make it invisible so it doesn't show on your photo page anymore. It's still there. So this is common practice. So it's a bit of a workaround for people, kind of preventing them from deleting data and then saying, oh, I didn't want to delete that. So we definitely are going to want to give the user the opportunity to say, oh, nope, sorry, I don't want to delete that. Because once it's deleted out of here, unless we've taken a backup of that database, it's gone. So then what should happen on the page? So let's say I have a delete link here. So I've got a couple of junk records here, right? We were testing out our validation last week. I put in some albums that are incomplete. So I'm going to want to delete these. So I'm going to click delete. It's going to give me some kind of message saying, are you sure you want to delete this? And if I click OK or yes, it'll do what Mike said. We'll run a delete command in our MySQL. We'll remove that album. And then what should we see in the browser? Yeah, then we'll probably want to reload the page and that album is going to disappear. So we'll write a delete page, but that delete page is invisible. We won't actually ever see it. It'll just identify the album, run the query, and then bring us right back here, and this page will be refreshed. So we're kind of building a hidden or invisible page to do our delete. So we'll get the delete working first, and then we'll add the confirmation at the end. We're going to need for our confirmation, that's where we're going to need this. We're going to write a little bit of jQuery. That'll pop up a simple message, are you sure, with an OK and a cancel button. And we can use the jQuery library to let us do that. Okay, so let's start setting this up. So on our albums page, we want to add, we've got 3 columns in our HTML table, and we need a 4th now, right? So we want a 4th heading and a 4th column. So we'll do this one at a time because our links are going to get kind of complicated. So first in our, where we're creating our table at the top. Oops, what am I doing? Let's create another TH tag that says delete. I know that's a bit hard to see, so I've highlighted in blue what we add. So instead of 3 columns, now we've got 4. Here, I'll put it on another line. So let's just add that. You can go back, refresh your page, and now you should have a heading with nothing underneath it. So now inside of our table, we also want a 4th column, and that column is going to have the word delete. So I'm just adding that. So we'll have the album title, the year, the artist, and a delete option. Now we've got a few options for what that delete should look like. So right now it just says the word delete. So what are the options we could use? Because this obviously needs to be something the user can click on, right? We don't just want it to be HTML text like this stuff. The user needs to be able to interact with this.
It could be a link or a button.
Yeah, so we could use either. So what do you think? So we could either make it a link and it'll look something like this, or we could use one of these and do it that way. Red button is good, yeah, because the red kind of indicates delete and also use with caution. So we can create this as a button. So let's create it as a button. Actually, hang on a minute. Sorry, we may not have to create it as a button. Let's just create it as a link. But we could maybe apply a Bootstrap button class to it. I think that will work. So if we give it a class, BTN danger. That's the red button. I think this will turn our delete into a red button with white text. Let's just check it out and see. Cool. It's good. So we haven't specified the href yet. We haven't said what page this is going to go to. So this is going to go to our hidden delete page. So we're going to call this page delete album.php. When we click that button, that's where we want to take the user. So if you click your button now, if you refresh your page once you've set up the href attribute, what happens when you click the delete button?
Well, right now, it'll just error out because we don't have.
Yeah, right now we get a 404 because we haven't built delete album. So that's fine. That's what should happen. So I'll refresh it. And it takes us here. That's fine. So we've done the easy part. There's kind of 3 parts to making this link work. This was the easy part. Link it to a page, wrap it in an anchor tag, give it a class. Now, we'll leave the confirmation for later. We're just going to do one other part and then we'll take a break. We'll do the little confirmation later. How do we know right now, no matter which link I click, they all go to the same page, which is fine. We don't need to write a different delete page for every album. But when we get to our delete page, how are we going to know which album the user wants to get rid of? Right now, it's the exact same. We're going to the same place. So when we try and write our code on our delete page to do what Mike said, to go to the database and remove this album, we have no idea which button was clicked on. So how can we tell this page which particular album we want to remove from the database? Milan? Sorry? Yes, we will definitely need a delete query, but that delete query needs one important piece of information. What information do we need to do the delete query? Yeah, we need to know which album ID we're deleting, right? Because our album ID is our unique identifier. In your database course now, right? We set up those album IDs. You guys have probably talked about primary keys now in your relational database course about a unique identifier. So, no, you haven't? Not yet. Not yet. So somehow this page needs to know the album ID, right? So what can we do with these links? They're all going to go to the delete page, but how can we send along the ID along with this button click?
Well, it's actually kind of handy that we're using a loop structure here, because for each article in the loop, we can, if we can just pull out our ID and keep it hidden, we can, for each member in the loop for the artist matches, we can send the ID as a post to the next page.
Okay. So that would be an option. Yep. Okay, so but we need a way to pass it. Here's how we're going to pass it. Remember, you may remember a few weeks ago, we talked about the difference between using post and get in our forms. What was the difference? Yeah, which one shows values in the URL bar? Get, right? We ran a query like on Amazon. So if I searched for, PHP, right? We could pass the value on the end of our URL. So we can attach onto these links, we can actually attach the ID right onto the link. Doing it with a form post is also possible. We don't have to. We can actually attach it right here. So it's going to look something like this. So we're going to add on this text to our link, and then we can reference the individual values this way with $album ID, the same way we're displaying the other columns for the album. So what I need to do here is close my single quote. Oops. And append on album. Then I open the single quote and put my double quote back in. Okay. So I've added that whole piece. That will append the ID number onto the end of our link. And then our delete page can use get to pull the ID from the URL and send it into our query, as Milan was suggesting. So this will allow us to pass that value from one page to the next. Just like on Amazon, it passes that keyword from my search to the search results page. So our quotes are a bit tricky here. We have double quotes around that whole thing. And then we have two single quotes, one after the equal sign, two inside our brackets, and one more here. So our syntax getting a little bit messy. But this should give us the result we need. As long as it does, we'll take a break in a second. So let's try that. So when I click this one, it gives me 1001, which is good. I click the next one. So now on our delete page, now we have all the information we need. So writing the code on this page is going to be pretty simple. We'll grab that ID number out of our URL using get. We'll connect to the database. We'll set up our delete command, which you've probably done in your database course, or maybe done. We'll execute that command. And then we'll look at how do we just go back to another page. We'll want to take the user right back here, and this page should be updated. That album should be gone. So they'll never even see the save page. User's basically just going to see a little kind of flicker in their browser. And then this list is going to be updated. So we don't have to, we could take them to the save page and say, you know, album deleted, click here to go back. We're kind of wasting the user's time making them do that. Why don't we just take them back here right away? They'll automatically see that the album they clicked is gone from the list. So they know they will know it worked. So we'll get it. So once delete is done, which shouldn't take us too long after the break, we're then going to add an edit column. We'll figure a color for those buttons. Typically, delete goes at the end. So we'll put on edit, and when we click edit, we'll take our user here and we'll pre-fill the form so we can change the values and then save those updates to the database, go back and see our updated list on albums again. So then with about 4 pages, we've kind of built out a whole application where we can do create, read, update, delete. Well, then once we can do that, it gets easy to build, well, whatever somebody asks you to build. Because all our web applications, that's all they're doing, are these 4 things: create data, read data, update data, delete data. Are there any questions so far about what's going on this page? Go get coffee. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break.